methods, which you can use. Number 6. The crew of the Sarah Joe. The Sarah Joe is a 17-foot motorboat that at the time 20-something-year-old Robert Mulakany acquired in the 1970s. He named it after his mom Sarah and dad Joe. The boat took 5 strong, healthy young men out to sea 40 years ago, and it wasn't until more than a decade later that their boat was found on the shores of one of the smallest of the Marshall Islands. But the men were not with the boat. Oddly enough, there was a shallow grave that contained the bones of one of the fishermen, but no other clues or signs of life. To make their disappearance stranger, oceanographers estimated that it would have only taken the boat about 3 months to drift onto the island, which means the boat, grave, or remaining crew should have been there when a government survey of the island took place in 1983, but they weren't. So we may never actually know what happened to the Sarah Joe and her crew for the 4 years between the disappearance and the survey of the island. Number 5. The missing lighthouse keepers. There was once an isolated island off the coast of Scotland where 3 lighthouse keepers lived and were responsible for keeping the building intact. One day when their monthly supply ship dropped in, the island was silent. No response from the lighthouse keepers. Eventually the captain and some crew members went to investigate and found the suspiciously empty lighthouse. 2 of the 3 waterproof coats were missing from their hangars, and the kitchen was left in a state as if people left in a hurry. The lighthouse log only added one mystery to the situation. The log described how one of the keepers wouldn't talk, and the other continuously cried for hours. All of this pain and fear seemed to be coming from what was referred to as a powerful storm looming in the distance. However, this begs the question, why were they so scared of a simple storm? They should have been safe in the brand new lighthouse, right? The log goes on to talk about how they all sat close together and prayed for the storm to be over. The final log states the storm has passed, the skies are calm, and God is over all. Their bodies were never found, and the cause of their deaths are still a mystery to this day. The most accepted theory is that they somehow got swept out to sea during the storm, never to be seen again. But one final detail remains, one that scared the captain and his crew to the bone. The powerful storm described in the log didn't exist. There were no storms reported in the area. In fact, the skies were calm all day. Number 4. The death of Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. Both girls went on a study abroad trip to Panama, where they went missing on a hike. After several weeks, some of their remains were found miles up the river from where they began their hike, along with a backpack that contained their belongings. The creepy part of it is that a camera in their backpack started out with pictures that they took of each other hiking, and then suddenly goes into over 100 pictures of what appeared to be nighttime pictures of rocks near a riverbed, the back of someone's head, and just pure blackness. The dark pictures appear to be taken many days after they went missing. There's a lot of theories as to why they went missing, what finally ended their lives, and why they were taking pictures, but there's no solid answer. According to their cell phone use records, they had been alive in the forest for days after they got lost, trying to get a signal from their phones to call emergency help. Number 3. The death of Kendrick Johnson. Kendrick Johnson was found rolled up in wrestling mats in Lowndes High School, and his death was ruled an accident. The official story is that he was reaching into the rolled-up wrestling mats to get his shoe and got stuck and died. An initial autopsy concluded that the death was accidental, and Johnson's family wasn't happy with that, so they had an independent autopsy performed. This second autopsy showed that he died from blunt force trauma, and there's actually blood in many of the crime scene photos. People believe the conspiracy between the school and police is keeping a lot of information from the family. Video footage from the gym during the time of his death is missing, which makes this mystery all the more unsettling. Number 2. The disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley. Amy was an American citizen who went missing during a Caribbean cruise on the Royal Caribbean Rhapsody of the Seas. On the morning of March 24th, 1998, Amy had been drinking in the dance club with the ship's band Blue Orchid. One of the band's members, Alistair Douglas, known as Yellow, said he parted with Amy at about 1 a.m. Sometime between 5:15 and 5:30, Amy's father Ron saw her asleep on the deck. When he got up at 6 a.m., she was no longer there. There were possible sightings of Amy in Curaçao in 1998 and 1999. 2 Canadian tourists reported seeing a woman resembling Amy on the beach in 1998. The woman's tattoos were allegedly identical to Amy's. A member of the Navy said he saw Amy in a brothel in 1999, and he claimed she told him that her name was Amy Bradley and that she begged him for help. There was another potential sighting in 2005, when the witness claimed she was seen in a department store restroom in Barbados. Amy's mother and father appeared on an episode of Dr. Phil. An image of a young woman resembling Amy that was emailed to her parents was shown on the show, and it suggests that she may have been sold into sex slavery. And number 1, the disappearance of Kenny Veach. Kenny Veach was a well-experienced hiker in Nevada who found a cave he described as the M Cave, as it was opened in the shape of an M. He claimed he heard very unusual noises from the cave and found it suspicious, as it was located 6 miles south of a top-secret airbase. As he began to enter the cave, he claimed his whole body began to vibrate.
Thank you.
The more he went into the cave, the worse the vibrating became. He said he suddenly became very afraid and hightailed it out of there. He recorded another trip to find the cave again and catch it on video, but this video ended up being a bust. He later went back to where he found the cave again, and has not been seen since. His phone was found in an abandoned mine entrance, but no body or evidence that he had gone down into the mine. He posted this video about the cave a few days before he went missing.
And I'm looking for a cave that I found, and I didn't have a sidearm when I was here before. And something about that cave just spooked me. Out of all the caves I've ever gone in, this one just made my body vibrate. The closer I got to it, the crazier my body felt. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to go in there right now, but I'm coming back someday. And I talked to some people on YouTube, and I told them, hey, I'm coming out here, you know, because they kind of called my hand on it. So I don't know if there's going to be anything to it, but it might be interesting. If I can find it, I got to relocate it. And this is a big mountain range I'm in. And I'm on foot, you know, my truck's way out there. There's no roads, there's no trails. It's a pretty rough terrain. So, hopefully I'll find it. It's shaped like a big M. It's a big cave that looks just like a gigantic M.
When I was a little younger, I enjoyed off-road biking, like on bike trails in the woods. Living in rural Massachusetts, I always did a lot of exploring, usually on my bike. One of those many days that I was feeling adventurous, I got on my bike and rode down Irving Street, the road my parents' old house sat on. This road went a long way down, and it basically just ran through trees in all directions, with the occasional farmland. I'd usually cut off this road onto an intersecting road, or I'd just ride into the woods through one of the dirt paths. This
trying to get better on getting rid of my erasing line, my pencil marks, because of what teacher said. Art teacher, obviously.
I didn't find the sign though, but I did find a trail that grew from the road into the woods. It was wide enough to easily navigate on my bike. So I turned off Irving Street and onto the dirt trail, which immediately dropped to a decline, allowing me to instantly pick up speed. I still don't know if these were the trails my friend was actually talking about or not, but they were fun to ride on, as they were very hilly and windy. I just rode around the apparent maze of trails, having fun exploring, until I started to get thirsty and realized I had forgotten my water bottle at home. Of course. So I decided to cut my bike short and start looking for the way back to the road. I rode around the trails trying to remember which way I came, but it was literally a maze. Irving Street was a very quiet road, so hoping to hear the sound of traffic was kind of pointless. This was back when flip phones were a thing, and I didn't even have a cell phone yet, honestly, so I couldn't exactly just pick out my iPhone to look for directions. Then I realized I wasn't alone in the woods. There was a woman not too far away from me, just standing there watching me, kind of creepily. She was older, probably 60s. I called out to her asking for help because I'm lost. She replied in a low voice, yet I could somehow make out what she said. She said, "You shouldn't be in here." I apologized and asked for directions one more time, but she said, "Get out now," in a disturbingly sadistic way. I wasn't staying there another second. I rode off down the trail, resuming trying to find the road again. But from that moment forward, every 5 minutes or so, I'd see that lady, not too far away, always looking at me. This went on for some time, to the point that I got so uncomfortable that I hid behind this giant stone for a while once I lost sight of her. I waited for a long time, and it was getting dark quickly. I swear I was starting to freak out. Another half hour of trying to navigate this maze, and it was getting too dark to even make my way around on the bike.
I grabbed it for
the trails now. I was so tired gut told me I was being watched. Like, you ever just get that feeling that you can sense the presence of someone else around you? I was right, because the old woman's voice broke the silence. She said, "Come here," but in a low voice, almost a whisper. This meant she was currently closer to me than I was comfortable with. I couldn't see a thing. I held myself together until she started making these cackling sounds. And that's when I lost it. I threw my bike to the floor. That was the last time I ever saw it. I started screaming, running through the woods. The nightmare of trying to find my way out of the woods finally ended when I saw the lights from a house not too far away. I ran as fast as I could to it and rang the doorbell. An older man answered the door, and I asked him for help, for some water and a ride or something. Thankfully, he was nice and happily offered to give me a ride to my house. He seemed particularly freaked out when I told him about the creepy woman in the woods. He said 3 people had gone missing in our county just that month alone. He also knew the trails I was talking about and said they were not privately owned by any woman, making the situation even weirder. I, of course, was furious about leaving my bike behind, but I had to get out of there. That woman had been stalking me riding on my bike for potentially hours. She was basically right in front of me in that pitch blackness. Browsing the app Letgo one day, I came across a listing for a free bike. It was a black Trek brand bike, which is a top bicycle brand. At the time, my bike was an old piece of crap Schwinn that I hadn't used in years, so obviously this listing caught my eye. I contacted the lister, asking for more details, like if the bike was actually free, and where and when would I be able to pick it up. The lister responded relatively quickly, saying yes, it's for free, and said first come, first serve, but to hurry because a lot of people were contacting him. I asked him for the location or address, and he sent me coordinates. That should have been my first red flag. Who sends coordinates? I asked him, how am I supposed to track the coordinates? He said download an app on my phone. Then I asked, is there a nearby address you could just give me? He said not really, because he was keeping his address to himself for privacy reasons, and there weren't really any nearby notable locations. So he gave me a phone number to text him, told me his name was Gene, and we set a meet time of 6 p.m., as that worked for both of our schedules. I downloaded this GPS coordinates tracker app, and the coordinates led me on a 25-minute drive. As I got closer and there was nothing but woods on either side of me, I started to wonder where exactly these coordinates would be taking me. I was now 2 minutes away, and it seemed I was as far as I was going to get with my car. Exactly what I was worried about came true. I'd have to cut through the woods to get to these coordinates. I parked my car on the side of the road, but before heading into the woods like a clueless madman, I texted Gene saying I was parked on the side of a desolate road next to woods on either side, and that the app was pointing me in the direction of the woods. He replied back a minute later saying, yeah, this area is sketchy that way. It would probably be better if you just cut through the woods instead of looking for the trail. If you follow the direction it tells you, you'll find a huge clearing in the woods where I'm waiting with the bike. I already drove this far. I figured I might as well just see this through, even if I was finding this increasingly bizarre. I started my way into the woods, swiping twigs and leaves out of my way as I did my best to make it through the thick woods. I wasn't dressed for this at all, though. I did this for probably 4 minutes until I saw I was approaching the coordinates on my phone, but I didn't see any clearing in the woods ahead of me. Something wasn't right, so before going any further, I texted Gene again, saying I'm just about to be there, but can't see the clearing in the woods. I said maybe I have the wrong coordinates. A minute passed without an answer, so I tried to call him, but it went to voicemail after 1 ring. Then he texted back saying, I have bad service, I can't talk on the phone. I asked him where should I go, I think I'm lost. He didn't answer. I waited and waited, hoping he would, but nothing. After a couple more minutes, I called it quits. I started to feel like this was all fake from the start, and I was becoming paranoid of my surroundings. The sun was going down, so I hurried back in the direction I came. I thought I would be followed, but as I looked back behind me constantly, I didn't see anyone. I made it back to my car to make a shocking discovery. All 4 of my tires were slashed. My body entered a fight or flight mode before even seeing who did this. I approached the door of the car, wondering if I should hide inside and lock the door, but as I looked into the car, I could see someone laying on the back floor hiding. I chose my flight response. I sprinted all the way down the road, saying, "Screw the piece of crap car."
Maybe you should have.
I heard my car door
left
open and slam shut. When I turned around,
or
I
brought
just
someone
briefly
with
saw
you.
someone running
I'm
into the
just
woods.
saying.
I took out my phone and of course called 911, asking them to please hurry to my location, that I'd be running down the road. 15 minutes or so later, a police car finally approached me with its lights on. They escorted me back to the scene of the crime, my car, and took a police report, which included every detail, like the slashed tires and the text conversation. They accompanied me as I waited for my roadside assistance company to come and tow my car. I was brought safely to a shop where they changed my tires on the spot. The only thing I worried about was that man Gene getting my license plate number and possibly tracking me with it. But to this day he hasn't. So I like to think I'm safe from that. When I was a teenager, before my friends and I had our driver's licenses, our main means of transportation was our bikes. Our town isn't that big, and all of us live a short bike ride away conveniently. We'd often go for bike rides during the day, just around the neighborhood for fun. But we really liked going for bike rides at night, especially in the town area on Main Street, by the bars and hubbub. It was a Friday night, pretty late, probably approaching midnight. I biked to Main Street with my friends Jackson and Roddy. It was a 15-minute bike ride from us. There were still some people out walking around down the street. Of course, we were only like 15 or 16, so we weren't actually going into any bars, just riding around for the vibe. We hung out in one of the parking lots on the street that we'd often just chill at. At that hour, there weren't many cars left in the parking lot. It was quieting down for the night. Roddy was the one to notice when a car pulled into the lot with its lights off and kind of parked conspicuously, in a way that it was facing us. After a few minutes, Jackson pointed out that he was pretty sure the guy in the car looked like he was watching us. So we started to migrate our hangout elsewhere. We biked out the exit of the parking lot and back onto Main Street, and the car also left the parking lot shortly after us. We all knew just by a single glance at each other, and didn't even have to speak a single word to know to start pedaling fast down the road. The car trailed us, but not too close behind. The driver must have somehow thought we weren't aware of it. He still had his lights off, not to mention. I said let's get to my house, instead of just aimlessly biking around trying to lose him in the streets. My house was the closest. It took us only like 5 minutes to get there.
To your house.
Before the car could turn the corner onto my street, we hurried to my backyard gate and rushed inside before he could see. We entered my house through the back door. My dad was still awake, surprisingly, in the living room. He was watching a movie. We all asked him if he could check outside if the car was anywhere out there. He stepped outside for a second, then came back inside saying the coast was clear. He said we were smart to bike away as soon as we were suspicious. Anyway, my dad went to bed after his movie. And usually he wanted my friends out by that point, so Jackson and Roddy left on their bikes. I swear it wasn't even 20 minutes later that I got out of my bed after hearing something from the backyard. I went to my window and looked down to the backyard. I lifted my window up a little more, very quietly, just to better hear the sound. It was like this little clicking, rustling sound that would repeat every, 4 seconds. I stuck my head out the window, and I saw the shed door was open. But that didn't answer what that clicking sound was. I went to my dad's room and woke him up. He came with me first to my room, where I showed him the shed door, and then made him listen for the sounds. But now the sounds had stopped. The two of us rushed downstairs to the back door, where we flipped on the backyard light. My dad yanked the back door open and stormed into the yard, yelling for whoever was out there.
Katie!
I worried about him going in the shed alone, so I came with him. But besides all the tools and other basic shed equipment, bikes and other shit like that, there was no one hiding in there. We found out on the way back inside the house that the clicking sounds I was hearing was someone trying to tamper with the outside lock, as the entire door handle was completely scraped up and almost ruined. The lock still worked, and that was only the storm door. There was still another door with a working lock behind it, so it was still safe. My dad told me to just go to bed, and he'd stay downstairs for the night and keep the outside lights on. He said he had the police come the next morning before I woke up. I'm 99% sure it was that man who followed us in the car. I don't know for sure how or when he found out where I lived, and I'm not sure why he gave up on busting the lock. Anything I say would just be a guess. My dad has always been too nice of a guy, like a pushover. I'll just start the story with that. I don't say it for no reason. We live in uptown Chicago. We don't have a huge family, so our Thanksgiving and Christmas gatherings are always small, like less than 6 people. This was Thanksgiving night of last year, 2019. Dinner was almost done already. My dad was picking up some last-minute foods like stuffing and cranberry sauce at the corner store since we didn't have any. My mom and I started setting the table, while my brother and grandparents sat at the table. My dad finally returned, but with more than just stuffing and cranberry sauce, though. He brought someone along with him. It was this middle-aged, dirty-looking man in a green puffer jacket and black pants. He looked homeless. My dad introduced the man as Stefan, and said he would be joining us for dinner tonight. My brother and I exchanged surprised, uncomfortable looks. Then my mom and I did the same. As my dad started preparing the stuffing, he was telling us how he met Stefan alone in the cold streets, and said we as a Christian family should do the right thing and invite him into dinner, as no one should be alone on Thanksgiving. My grandma invited the man to sit with us. I could tell my mom wasn't comfortable with this, as she whispered stuff in my dad's ear. Too late now, though. The man was already seated at the table. Good thing I didn't sit next to him, because I could smell his clothes from across the table. I didn't understand what my dad was thinking with this. When all the food was finally on the table, everyone sat down and we did our prayer. My brother and grandma attempted to hold hands with Stefan, but he didn't grab their hands back. I low-key watched him as we all prayed, and he just sat there, his eyes bulgingly wide, his mouth not moving. He just sat there like he didn't want to be there. After the prayer, we all began to eat, and at least 3 of my family members tried talking to him at some point. He didn't seem friendly at all, though. His responses were very dry and one-wordish. It made the dinner a little uncomfortable. I didn't know what my dad saw in this man or why he felt comfortable bringing him into our home. I get trying to help the needy, but there was another way to do it than this. He helped himself to some food, but even the way he ate was really messy. Like his fingers were really greasy, some food got in his hair. It wasn't pleasant to watch. Now you may think I'm just trash-talking a homeless person, so let's move past that. Eventually Stefan said, "Excuse me, I gotta go to the bathroom." My dad pointed him in the direction of the bathroom, which was down the half flight of stairs down the hall to the left. I got up, and saying thank you, and followed the directions. Once we were sure he was out of earshot, my mom and grandparents started asking questions like, what the hell is wrong with my dad bringing that man in here? My dad whispered that he felt terrible and wanted to do something right. My mom questioned how we were going to get him out of here now. My dad insisted that we were being good people, though, and that we'd agree eventually. We continued eating, till my brother asked, "Where is he? He's been gone a while." We all agreed it was strange, so my dad went down the stairs to the bathroom to look. He came back up a few seconds later saying he wasn't in the bathroom. My grandmas looked very distressed as my grandpa started cursing in Italian. My brother, my dad, and I started checking the whole apartment. My dad was calling Stefan's name the whole time. We checked all the bedrooms, all the closets. Somehow he wasn't anywhere. However, the window in my parents' room was open, enough for someone to climb through. So we assumed the obvious.
Yes, he must have stolen something.
My mom came in yelling at my dad that this is what happens for him being stupid and letting a potentially dangerous person into our home. We all had to agree, sadly. My dad closed the window.
Now he knows
we tried to go about the rest of our dinner normally. But of course, the whole time we talked about the bizarre encounter. After dinner, we had dessert. Then eventually my grandparents left.
Hi, Katie.
The 4 of us cleaned up the table and dishes. And a couple hours later, everyone dispersed to their rooms for bed. I'm being very loose with the time frame because this was almost a year ago. But I believe it was another hour later that I finally turned off my TV for bed. The silence in the room allowed me to hear it. The breathing. I heard it in my room.
What's that? What's that?
My breathing.
Up.
I was frozen stiff. I didn't even want to move or sit up.
You're not.
I didn't know where exactly in the room it was coming from.
No.
I just looked for the door,
Katie,
trying to summon up the courage to run.
I will give you
I heard the faintest shuffling sounds, like of the fabric of a jacket.
But you're not coming on my lap right now.
Almost in my ear.
No.
And a hand pressed down on my neck.
No, you're a good dog.
That's when the scream I'd been building up exploded out of my mouth as I literally sprang out from the bed and into the hall calling for my dad.
I know.
Everyone came out from their rooms and looked down the hall toward my room when I said Stefan's in there. Shockingly, Stefan stepped out from my room, looked at us, and walked out the front door as my dad yelled at him to get out. Of course, without getting physical because he's a big softie. Stefan was long gone by the time police finally showed up. The police said the important thing was that he left and none of us were hurt, and now just to make sure to lock the door and windows. They took our description of Stefan and they left. I like to think my dad learned his lesson from that. You can't trust everyone you meet.
I don't even know what I have a random drawing.
For Black Friday a few years ago, I went to Best Buy. Well, technically it was midnight the night before Black Friday. My local Best Buy is always open late the night before Black Friday. I went with my best friend Taylor to look for a new laptop and maybe whatever other stuff caught my eye. We split off to look for our own things. While browsing the laptop section, someone in a blue Best Buy shirt approached me asking if I needed help. I gave him specific specs I was interested in. He started looking around with me. He showed me one laptop he claimed he really liked, then asked me what it was I'd be doing with the laptop. I found it to be a slightly odd question, but maybe it was part of his sales pitch. I said just for school and general web browsing kind of deal. After this point, though, he seemed more interested in me rather than helping me.
Insurance.
He was asking a bunch of personal questions like where I'm from, where I go to school, etc. I don't want to sound self-absorbed, but I do get a decent amount of mail action when I go out. Anyway, I started realizing he seemed to be hitting on me, and I found him overall creepy, so I reminded him politely about the laptop, and I was in a hurry. He was relentless, though. He actually asked for my phone number after that. I made it clear to him I was uninterested. Luckily, I locked eyes with Taylor, who happened to be walking over, and I mouthed the word help to her. She understood, and she came over and called my name, saying, "Come and hurry." I said, "Sorry, I have to go," to the creepy guy, and followed Taylor away. We walked to the other side of the store. I told her I didn't want to see that guy again. He was obsessive and creepy and didn't get the hints. We left the store after that with plans of going shopping elsewhere tomorrow. We were both starving, though, so we went to the nearby diner, which is open 24/7. We sat at a booth and looked at the menu. The place was practically empty at this hour, except for a lone man sitting at the bar.
Oh my God.
Looking at the menu as well. His back was to me. I didn't notice him there 5 minutes earlier. He was in a gray jacket, but I recognized his hair. I whispered to Taylor to look at him. As we looked at him, he tried to subtly turn to look at us, but when he realized we were already staring, he looked away. It was him, the Best Buy worker. "Oh my God, he followed us," I whispered. "Let's go," I said, and we got up and left the diner. We hurried to my car, and I drove us home to my house as fast as I could. Taylor was sleeping over that night. To put it short, eventually there were 3 slow knocks on the living room window.
Drawings on here.
We both shrieked and didn't know what to do. My apartment is on the bottom floor.
Pointless to show
He kept saying. We went to the window, but oddly couldn't see outside, like total blackness. The view outside was blocked. We were too creeped out. We had to call the cops. When we got a knock on the door from police, we immediately felt safer. So it turned out the reason we couldn't see out the window was because a shirt was hung over the window, blocking view in or outside. Not just any shirt, a blue Best Buy shirt. Pinned to the shirt was a post-it note that said, "I don't work at Best Buy, bitch." So the police recommended I file a harassment charge. But the problem was I didn't know his name or who it was. They said I could get a lawyer and get the surveillance footage from Best Buy to find the guy. But it sounded like a lot of work.
And now
I let it go, but I stayed at Taylor's
get
apartment for a few
paper to sketch this.
I still can't believe that guy followed us all the way to my house. Some people are dangerously crazy.
I mean, I could do the drawing on my tablet. I don't do that stuff. Scary stories.
When I would hear the old adage, right place at the right time, I'd think to myself, yeah, okay, it's all just coincidence. But after what I've been through these past 6 weeks, my mind is changing. Maybe you are put in a specific place at a specific time for a reason,
well, this isn't going so
I digress.
well.
As most of you know, the Pacific Northwest, for those unfamiliar, was recently ravaged by an ungodly amount of wildfires. Seeing all the little fire emojis dotted all over maps of California, Oregon, and Washington made my heart ache. My home was burning. Fortunately for myself and my family, our area hadn't been hit as hard as many others. I had planned a camping trip a few weeks prior to this pandemic of wildfires, so I was happy to see that my usual spot was not near any major fires and subsequently had been deemed safe to travel and camp in. I am a camping enthusiast, enjoy deep wilderness camping, and my usual spot is fairly remote. It requires a 2-hour drive up a 2-lane road into the middle of nowhere, followed by a 30-minute drive up an old logging road that ultimately crests a small mountain. The mountain slope leads into a beautiful valley, with much larger mountains encircling the valley from the north and east.
As a demon.
In the center was a decently sized
They're kind of the same thing,
The
though.
clearing was littered with fallen logs, beautiful pink and yellow yarrow flowers, and the occasional family of white-tailed deer. This was my true happy place. This valley has a name, but I will keep it hidden for anonymity purposes. I left on a Tuesday morning in early September. The drive to the mountain was relatively uneventful, besides almost hitting a large buck who decided to cross the road right in front of my truck. I arrived on the mountain's crest and began unpacking the bed of my truck. I had just recently bought a new 2020 Toyota Tacoma. I parked my truck facing the clearing, roughly 5 feet from the edge of a small drop-off. The slope down to the valley wasn't steep and is fairly easy to hike down. I'd say it's about 400 to 450 feet from where I parked down to the start of the valley floor. I had camp set up just as dusk was setting. I usually would have a large fire going, but with the previously mentioned wildfires, that wasn't possible. I brought a small propane stove and a space heater to prevent any accidents. As I finished gulping down my last bite of dinner, I noticed it was quickly growing dark. I hopped off my tailgate and made my way to my driver's side door. As I was digging in my pockets for my keys, I looked down into the valley and noticed something strange. I could make out 2 small circular lights in the far distance. They flickered as they quickly moved closer to the clearing. It looked as if though they were hovering and navigating through the trees at a steady pace. I crouched down in front of my truck and looked on in curiosity. I watched for a few minutes until the lights eventually arrived at the tree line of the clearing. I could hear the humming of motorcycle engines echoing from the valley, and that's when I realized that that's what I was staring at. What on earth were these 2 people doing riding dirt bikes out here? This was the first time I had ever seen another person out here. The lights were stationary at this point. I assumed the 2 riders were off their bikes and walking around the clearing, although this is only speculation, as I couldn't see anything aside from the 2 bike headlights.
Not much. But, you know.
They couldn't see me as I had no visible lights on or
Now,
a campfire going.
we try again.
I instantly thought to grab my phone out of my glove box.
Hardcore biker.
Warn the public of suspected people intentionally starting fires in the woods. They encourage citizens to be vigilant and gather any evidence they could. In an absolute lapse in judgment, I pressed the unlock button on my keys.
A reference
my
photo.
truck lights flashed and a loud beeping sound rang out. I had just given my location to these midnight riders. In a rush of adrenaline, I threw myself onto the ground stomach first. My mind was screaming, "Good going, Einstein." I could barely think as my heart was pounding in my ears. I watched as the bike lights began to turn back into the direction they came from and eventually disappeared into the darkness. I could hear the engines
totally a
running
biker.
harder than they had before. That
all I'm
unsettled
saying.
me a bit. As I stood up and brushed myself off, I began thinking about how odd it was. Usually people with good intentions do not run off like that when they notice other campers. These people were obviously up to no good down there. Maybe drug traffickers, meth cookers, arsonists. My mind was filled with all the potential threats I might have alerted to my location. I sat in my truck and mulled over my options. Should I drive home? What if they were waiting for me at the end of the logging road? Was I overreacting? I decided to pack up camp and spend the night in my truck and drive home first thing in the morning. After packing everything up, I drove down the logging road a little ways and backed into a small gap in the mountain face. That way, if the midnight riders decided to pay me a visit, they might miss me. I was in full paranoia mode. I lowered my seat back, racked around in my handgun, and eventually dozed off as the adrenaline turned into exhaustion. I awoke to my alarm, with my life for hire by ADTR blaring from my phone. In a groggy daze, I sat up and rubbed my eyes. My phone said 6:32 a.m. I looked out my windshield. I could see thick brown smoke swirling in the wind. As I stepped out of my truck, I was hit with the intense smell of burning wood. So as you guessed, there was a fire very close by. I jumped back into my truck and raced back up the mountain. From my camping spot, I'd be able to get a better understanding of the situation. As I drove way too fast up this narrow logging road, I noticed the smoke was thinning out as my elevation grew. My heart sank at this realization. When I reached the crest, I jumped into the truck bed and looked out over the valley.
It's
I could see
Thanksgiving,
blue skies above the mountains across from me to the north and east. My heart sank as this confirmed my suspicion. I turned toward the logging road to my right. I could see the smoke thicken from that direction. I was trapped. My mind instantly went to the two riders from the previous night. I grabbed my phone, praying for a signal. Of course, no such luck. I jumped off my truck bed and threw my passenger door open. I frantically searched for my backpack. I ripped it apart. Once I found it, looking for my GPS satellite phone. I kissed it with joy when I grabbed it from the bottom of the bag. I flipped it open and thanked the Lord I had a signal. I called 911 to report the fire and request help. I chatted with the operator for about 15 minutes. These are just a bunch of
dumb little sketches.
The operator said she'd contact
and by the way,
firefighting companies and attempt to get a
helicopter
to evacuate me.
Let's read.
After being on hold for a few minutes, I was transferred to a helicopter pilot with a wildland firefighting company.
And if you want to see more speed paints that are
I
not
the
on my
name, and the man said he knew where
Instagram
it
or
was.
shit.
He claimed that they were sending a helicopter
I
to pick
do
me
have
up
a
and
YouTube
that I
channel.
needed to be there and ready to leave as soon as they landed. After we disconnected, I rushed to clear out my truck.
I do my
valuables.
art. My art videos.
And said sorry to my new
I
truck,
post some gaming.
It was evident the fire would eventually consume her.
Eventually, I will be back to doing some creepypasta character reviews I did before, and there's a lot of other things that will be coming soon. So please do check that out. Also, if you have a Switch, I do, and I'm looking for some other people to play some Animal Crossing with, if you want to. But anyways,
when I got to what I assumed was the
center,
that is
I
glanced up at the peak of the small mountain.
I'm going to end this video
see my bright
here.
red truck sitting where I left it. Roughly 200 feet to the left,
my commissions
a wall of fire.
are going to be opened, and our trays are going to be open today. So
from the wall as it
you can comment or PM me.
I turned
up
away,
to you.
Not wanting to watch my $39,000
have a good day, and
go up in flames. I began scanning the skies, searching for my rescue. I concentrated on listening for the chopping sound of the helicopter's rotors.